We continue now at the top of Daf Kuf Lamed Hey Amid Beis in Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 135b. On the previous Amud, the Gemara was discussing the case in the Mishnah. The case in the Mishnah was, let's say you have a situation, for example, of two brothers, and then there's a third individual, and it's a suffix. He's a suffix whether he's a brother or not. One of the brothers says that the suffix is in fact a brother, and the way the Gemara explained the Mishnah, the other brother says that he's not sure. He doesn't know whether this suffix is a brother or not. And so the Mishnah said that in such a situation, that person who is a suffix, he can take a share from the inheritance of the brother who says that the suffix is a brother, but he cannot take anything from the brother who says he doesn't know, because he doesn't have evidence that he really is a brother, so he can't take from him. And so Rava said on the previous Amud, some have the gears of Rabba, either Rava or Rabba said on the previous Amud, that would seem to prove that Bari V'Shem, in a situation where you have somebody who's certain, one of the brothers is saying, I know for sure the suffix is a brother, but the other brother is Shema, he doesn't know, and apparently Lav Bari Ad, if the Bari does not win, you can't take anything away from the Shema. And now Abaye says it's not necessarily a proof that Bari V'Shema Lav Bari Adif. Liolam Eimala Chayiv. Really, I can say to you that Bari V'Shema, we would say that the Shema is Chayiv, Bari Adif, that the Bari wins. If one side is certain and the other is not sure, even though the one that's not sure has possession, we could really say that the Bari wins. It's possible that we would say Chayiv. And so why over here does the brother who says, I don't know, that he's not obligated to give any of his share? V'shani Hach, it's different over here. The Chamone La'acher B'yad Chadami. Because the person who's the suffix, he himself doesn't know. It's really just the brother on his behalf who's saying, I am certain that this is our brother. This would be more similar to a situation of not Mona li biyadcha, you owe me a Mona, and the other one says, I don't know. This is Mona la'acher biyadcha, you owe somebody else a Mona, and then the person says, I don't know. That's not the same as the classic case of Bari V'Shema. And the Rashbam explains, Liolam Chayiv, really in the case of Bari V'Shema, I would say Bari Adif, and I would say the Shema is Chayiv. To Bari V'Shema, Bari Adif, again, in the classic case of Bari V'Shema, it could be that Bari is Adif. V'Shani Hacha, but it's different over here. Da Suffik Atzmo, the person who is a Suffik, he himself, Eino Yodei, he doesn't know whether he's a brother or not. Ve'eno Yochol Liton Tainas Vada, he can't make a certain claim. It's really just one of the brothers that's claiming on his behalf. V'Suffik V'Suffiku, it's one Suffik against another Suffik, meaning it's really that they are both Shemas in this case. It's not Bari V'Shema. V'hilkach uki mamona b'cheskas mari. Therefore, the money stays where it is. Aval ha'ach toein b'shvil ha'safik mona la'achi b'yerchem. Over here again, the brother is claiming on behalf of the suffix that he's owed a mona. Hilkach amri le lav bal dvarim didiyat. Therefore, the other brother can say, but you're not even really the opposing litigant. You're claiming it on behalf of the suffix, but the suffix is not claiming anything, and therefore I do not need to worry about your claim. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Mace, if the person who's a suffix dies, Yachzur nechasim lemekom, and then the property returns to its original place. And really, with regards to this situation, the Mishnah made a distinction. The Mishnah said, let's say the suffix, let's say the person who was a suffix dies, and he got property from elsewhere, that property is actually inherited by all of the remaining brothers, even the brothers who are not sure whether the suffix was a brother or not. However, in terms of the property that the suffix got from the inheritance, so there he only took from the brother who said that he was a brother. He didn't take from the other brothers. So in terms of that property just goes back to the brother who was certain that this suffix was a brother. We make that distinction in terms of the property. And so the Gemara now asks, Rava asked the following question, Shevach sheshivchu nechasa me'aleihem mahu. What if you have an enhancement that happens to the property on its own? So what is that considered? Is that considered to go back only to the brother who he got the share from? Or is that considered property that came to the suffix from elsewhere, and all of the brothers get that enhancement? Because again, when he's inheriting property together with the brothers, he's not getting from all of them. He's only getting from the brother who said that he was a brother, that he is in fact entitled to the property. He only gets from that share, but now that property has been enhanced, it has improved, and so maybe the enhancements, they have to be divided among all of the brothers, even the brothers who say they don't know. That's the question of Rava. And the Gemara says, when it comes to the enhancements that reach the shoulders, that's not a question. That refers to produce that's about to be harvested. That's certainly considered like property that comes from elsewhere, and that will be divided among all of the brothers. When is it a question for you? Let's say it's enhancements that they don't reach the shoulders. Let's say, for example, you have a palm tree that thickens, or ara v'aska sirton, let's say you have land, and the silt builds up in the land, that's an enhancement. So what would happen in terms of those enhancements? The Gemara leaves that as a question. And the Rashbam explains, B'shevach hamagil l'chsafayim lo tiboy loch, again, if it's enhancements that reach the shoulder, that's not a question, meaning shenosan zeh l'safik karka rekonis, one of the brothers, he gave this suffix some empty land, again, that's the brother who admitted that the suffix was a brother, v'tarach ba, and then this brother worked the land, v'tarach ba zeh ha-suffix, this brother who was a suffix, he worked the land, lachrosh v'lizroa, he plowed, he planted, v'harei yata kishachozeres lo l'nosein meleya peros, now it's full of fruits, so lo tiboy loch, that's not a question. That kind of enhancement, they're all going to get it. That's like enhancements, property coming from elsewhere. And there we wouldn't call it the property returning to its original place, because that wasn't the original place. This is totally new fruits. He didn't give him produce. That brother gave him empty land. Now you have all of this produce. That's like property that comes from elsewhere. It goes to all of the brothers. The question is, let's say you have a palm tree, it thickens, so its name has not changed from what it was originally, it's the same tree. V'yaska sirton, or again, let's say you have land that yields silt, me'atzma, that happens on its own, shalo zivla hasafik, we're not talking where it was fertilized by the brother that was a suffix, v'lo tarach bekach, he didn't put a lot of effort into that, so those kind of enhancements, that's the question, and the Gemara left that as a question. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Misha Meis v'nimtzes daitaki kashur al yerecho, if somebody dies and we find a will that is tied to his thigh, harezu ein klum, that's nothing because he never transferred ownership of the will to somebody, and therefore the will will not take effect. But zicha bala'acher, but if he did transfer ownership of the will to somebody else, bein min hayorshin, bein sheinan min hayorshin, whether that person was one of the heirs or not one of the heirs, devar of kayam, and his words are accepted, and that will is effective. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, Eze hi daitaki, what's a daitaki? Kol shekasav bo, anytime it's written in a dot, tehei lemekam velios, this will be to stand and exist, and it means it will exist after my death. Ve'eze hi matanan, what's considered to be a gift? Kol shekasav bo mehayom alachar misa, if you write into the document, it's from today and after death, that's considered to be a gift. And the Gemara says, Ela mehayom alachar misa hu dahavi matana. If he writes mehayom alachar misa, that's a gift. But me'achsha, but if he writes from now, lo havi matana, it's not a gift. What exactly does that mean? And the Gemara explains, Zamar Abaya says, Hachi Kamar. This is what the Bryce is saying. Ezuhi matnas bori shehi kematnas shchimera. When do you have a gift given by a healthy person which is similar to a gift that's given by a shchimera, by someone on his deathbed? Meaning, the lokani ela la'achar misa, meaning that the kinyan only happens after the person dies. Kol shekasav ba mehayom la'achar misa. That's if you write in there, mehayom la'achar misa, then the kinyan will actually happen after death. And the Rashbam explains that what's happening by this matnas bori, where he writes mehayom la'achar misa, the idea is that the guf hakarka, the land itself, the acquisition is actually mehayom, it's from right now, and the idea is that he's going to get the peiros la'achar misa. That's how it's possible to give something after death if it's given in that fashion. As the Rashbam explains, ve'ezu hi matnas bori shetikne kol shekasaba mehayom. Again, what's a matnas bori? He writes mehayom la'achar misa. The mashma hachi, which implies as follows: gufa kaneloch, the actual land you're going to acquire mehayom from today. Uperi la'achar misa, and you'll get the produce from that land after I die. Aval ilo have a kasaba mehayom, and the Rashbam notes, but if he did not write in there mehayom from today, eino kona, he wouldn't be able to acquire the produce after the person dies. De'ein matana la'achar misa, a person is not able to give a gift after death. You can only do it in this fashion if you're going to give the actual land from today while you're alive. Sharei ein koach l'adam litein mikodem l'chein davar shelo yuchal lahaknos ba'oso hazman shu rotza sheteskayim hamatana. A person can't give earlier something for later on, but that later on is a time when he wouldn't have been able to give it. How can a person give something after he dies and buried? And so the point is, you obviously, while you're alive, you can't say, I'm going to give you something that the kinyan should take place after my death if you couldn't give it after your death. That's why you have to give in this fashion of mehayom ulachar misa. And the Rashbam continues, and then the Gemara asks, the reason why it works is because he writes la'achar misa with the mehayom. Are we saying that, let's say he only wrote mehayom, as the Gemara said, me'achshav. Let's say he didn't write the la'achar misa, it wouldn't be be a gift? V'alo kal v'chomer certainly should work. To have a matana gemura me'achshav, he's giving it totally from right now. Sharei nasan lo gufav upeiros mehayom. Then he'd be giving him the land and the produce from today. So what does this price even mean? And so then the Gemara explained, the lo kani peiros el la'achar misa. We're trying to give a case where you're going to get the produce specifically after death. Dumya dematnas shchimera, similar to a gift given by someone on his deathbed. And over there we say sheino kona el la'achar misa. By a shchimera we always say that the kinyan takes place la'achar misa. That's a special halacha by a shchimera. Where do we find that? By a bari, by a healthy person. Again, that's when you do this mehayom la'achar misa. Umiu bahachi adifa mishchimera. But the Rashbam notes, in this fashion it's actually better than a shchimera. The mana shchimera yachol lachzer bo v'litein la'achar kidel kamon. When it comes to a gift of a shchimera, someone on his deathbed, he's actually able to retract. The shchimera can retract and give it to someone else. Daitiki mevateles daitiki. That's what it means, that one will can nullify another will. Avol matnas bori de mehayom la'achar misa. But if a person is healthy and gives a gift of mehayom la'achar misa, where the person, the recipient, is acquiring the guf hakarka from right now, so eno yachol limchar od haguf kol yimei chayev. He can no longer sell the actual land the rest of his life. He's actually given that away already, elapeiros, that he'd only be able to sell the produce, but not the actual land. And the Gemara continues, Yosef Rabba bar Rav Huna b'achsadra devei Rav. Rabba bar Rav Huna was sitting on the balcony of the yeshiva of Rav. Yosef v'kamar mishmei de Rav Yochanan, and he was sitting, and he was saying in the name of Rabbi Yochanan as follows, Shchiv me'ra shamar kisvu tenu mana leploni. If someone on his deathbed says, write and give 100 dinars to Ploni, v'meis, and he dies, ein kosvin v'nosin, we do not write it and give it over, because in this particular case, even though in general when a Shchiv me'ra says to give a gift, we will follow through, but in this case where he says kisvu, he talks about writing the shtar, shema lo gomer lahaknoso ela v'shtar, maybe he meant to say that the kinyan should only be effective with a shtar, v'ein shtar la'achar misa, you can't draw up the shtar after his death, and therefore it's not going to be effective. Amar lahu Rebbe Elazar said to them, is daharu bo, you should be careful in this halacha. This halacha is accurate. Rav Shizvi says a slightly different version of the above, that Rabbi Elazar Amar was actually Rebbe Elazar who said the halacha, not Rabbi Yochanan. V'amar lahu Rabbi Yochanan is daharu bo, and it was Rabbi Yochanan who said to them, you should be careful about this halacha, that this halacha is accurate. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak kevasei de Rav Shizvi mistabra. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, it makes sense, the version that Rav Shizvi has, that again it's Rebbe Elazar who made the statement, and it's Rabbi Yochanan who said, is daharu bo. And why does that make sense? Because he amrid b'shlama, Rebbe Elazar Amra. If you're going to say correctly that Rebbe Elazar made the halachic statement, so itzrich Rabbi Yochanan le'asudei, aled Rebbe Elazar would make sense that it's necessary for Rabbi Yochanan to testify about Rebbe Elazar's words and say that they are accurate. Eloi amrit Rabbi Yochanan Amra. But if you're going to say that Rabbi Yochanan's the one, it was Rabbi Yochanan Amra, Rabbi Yochanan's the one that said the halacha, itzrich Rebbe Elazar le'asudei, aled Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi. Does Rebbe Elazar need to come along and testify on behalf of Rabbi Yochanan, who was his Rebbe? It would not make sense that Rabbi Elazar is coming to support Rabbi Yochanan. Rather, it makes more sense that Rabbi Yochanan is coming to support Rabbi Elazar. And the Gemara continues, V'yoden further, Tashma, come and hear the following proof to Rabbi Elazar Amra, that it was Rabbi Elazar who made the statement. The Shalach Ravin Mishmeid Rabbi Avohu, because Ravin sent in the name of Rabbi Avo, Havu Yodim, it should be known, Shashalach Rabbi Elazar, Lagola Mishum Rabbeinu, that Rabbi Elazar sent to the exile in the name of Rabbeinu, in the name of our Rebbe, that's referring to Rav, Shchiv Meira Shamar Kisvu Tenu Mana Leploni Vameis. If a Shchiv Meira, a person on his deathbed, he says again, write and give a mana, 100 dinar to so-and-so, and he dies, Ein Kosvin V'nosin, we do not write it and give it. Shemalo Gomer La'aknoso El B'shtar, because again, maybe he only intended to give it with a document. Ve'in shtar la'achar misan, you don't have a shtar after death. For Rabbi Yochanan Amar Tibadik, and Rabbi Yochanan says this should be examined, which we'll explain in a moment, but essentially Rabbi Yochanan is saying this halacha is accurate, but you have to examine exactly how it should be stated. As the Gemara now clarifies, my Tibadik, what does Rabbi Yochanan mean when he says it should be examined? Ki Yasser Rav Dimi Amar, when Rav Dimi came, he said that Rabbi Yochanan stated two halachas as follows. Number one, daitiki mevatelas daitiki. One will can nullify another will. That's what we mentioned already in the Rashbam. And the second halacha is the one regarding what we just talked about. Shchiv meira shamar kisvu tenu mana leploni vameis. If a shchiv meira says, write and give a mana to so-and-so and he dies, so then the halacha is as follows. Rowan, we have to see. Im kimiyafa es kocho, if he was just doing it to strengthen the gift, but really the gift was being given without the shtar, so then kosvin, so then we actually could write it and give it, because it wasn't that you need the shtar in order to have the kinyan, and therefore, again, it can be given like any gift of a shchimera. Vim lav, but if not, ein kosvin, then you don't write it, because then again, maybe he was only giving it with a shtar, and there's no shtar, liyachar misa. And the Rashbam explains, im kimiyafa es kocho, if it's to strengthen it, meaning im kedei liyafos kocho shal makavel matan, if it was in order to strengthen the person who's receiving the gift. That's why tziva hashchimera lichtov lo es hashtar. That's why the shchimera said to write the shtar. Lios lo le'edus al matan azu, that it should be like a testimony about the gift. V'lo la'akef ha-matan neskavin. He wasn't intending to hold back the gift. To lo yikna ela b'shtar, that the kinyan should only be with a document. So if that's the case, kosvin v'nosan afil lachar misa, then we actually would write it and give it even after death. Well, the Kamon Mefarish further on in the Gemara will explain, hey chidami, what exactly would be the case where we know that it's kimiyafes kocho, v'hainu tivadik delel. That's what Rabbi Yochanan meant when he said tivadik, you have to examine the circumstances. And the Gemara continues, Mesiv Rabbi Abba bar Memel. Rabbi Abba bar Memel asks a question from the following brisa. Bori sha'amar kisvu tenumona leploni v'meis. If a healthy person says, write and give 100 dinars to so-and-so and he dies, ein kosvin v'nosin, we do not write it and give it. And so we can infer from the brisa ha'shchimera, but if it would not be a healthy person, if it would be a shchimera, someone on his deathbed, kosvin v'nosin, it sounds like we would write it and we would give it. And the Gemara says, "Hu mosiv love, hu mefarik lo." He asked the question and he answered it. But miyafes kocho, based on what we just said above, you can say that the brisa is talking about a case of miyafes kocho. In the case of miyafes kocho, as we said above, then we actually would write and give the gift. And the Gemara says, "Hechi dami miyafes kocho." What exactly is the case of miyafes kocho? How do we know if the purpose of the shtar is just to enhance the gift? And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Kuf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph.